Well, hi there, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for another Ask the Attorney segment. I'm Maya Engel, live in our digital studio, joined once again by Mary Ann Wehr. She is an estate planning attorney at Great Lakes Center for Estate Planning. So, Mary Ann, thanks again for being here. And of course, we're not alone tonight. You brought a guest.
Absolutely, I did. And I am so excited. I've been talking about this guest for my last two segments, right? And tonight it's a topic that's really very near and dear to my heart. And it's a really, Stephanie's going to talk about really practical ways to use estate planning tools in place of a guardianship. But it's just so exciting to have Stephanie here. She's been in the heat of the moment for years. And I think that probably she will do a much better job introducing herself, as long as I'm not putting you on the spot, Stephanie. But I know you'll be able to describe your talents far better than I will. So take it away.
Well, thanks, Mary Ann and Maya, for having me. I'm excited to be here. So just a little bit about myself. I am a nurse at Munson Medical Center. I've been a nurse there for nearly 20 years, and most of that time was spent in the intensive care unit, caring for patients and families in some of their darkest days. Where I believe, had there been a little bit of planning or some of these estate planning tools, as Mary Ann talks about, it could have saved a lot of burden and stress for everybody involved. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm no longer at the bedside and had kind of transitioned into this more of a supportive role where I can be called in to help, whether it's staff, patients, or families, work through some of the difficult decisions that need to be made, especially when there is no roadmap to tell us where to go. And a patient is in a position where they can't tell us. And that's essentially what these estate planning tools will do for you.
Well, Stephanie, again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're going to get more into that topic in a minute. But before that, I just want to remind all of our viewers that if you have any questions for Mary Ann or for Stephanie, you can leave them in the comments and we will try to get to them throughout this segment. But we do already have a question right now from Vicky. Vicky's wondering how to process a transfer on death deed.
A transfer on death deed. So Vicky, I'm assuming that you're asking me about a ladybird deed that we've talked about, where you identify a beneficiary in the event of your death. And in that situation, it has been found that a ladybird deed transfers immediately upon death. But there are some recordings and some filings that I think are great ideas with the county, like the county that you are in, with their registrar of deeds. And that is recording the death certificate with the registrar of deeds, and also recording a new deed naming the beneficiary as the owner. So showing the actual conveyance. There's actually case law that has said that once a person dies, if they have a transfer on death deed, then it will transfer immediately. And there's a case out of Minnesota where a house burned down shortly after the person's death, and the insurance company didn't have to cover it because the person that owned the house was no longer under contract with the insurance company. So I always give the suggestion that when we issue a ladybird deed or record a ladybird deed, that we also get a hold of the insurance company and add the beneficiary, whether it's a trust or your daughter or son, as additional insureds on the policy. Then that kind of fills that gap. I hope that answered the question. And if there's not any more questions now, please keep them coming. I think you're going to find this topic tonight just super, super interesting. And I want to just set a little bit of context around it. We're going to be talking about advanced healthcare directives, or general power of attorney for healthcare. You'll hear many names, but it's really identifying a patient advocate for you in the event that you can't speak for yourself. So you've been in that car accident. You became, maybe your older mother now has dementia and can't make decisions for herself. So we're going to talk about the context of these healthcare directives, or durable power of attorneys for healthcare, in the context of tonight of estate planning. They're estate planning tools. And all people over the age of at 18 and older should actually have one. People under 18 have their parents to make those decisions, right? So I'm really excited to have Stephanie because she has been in the heat of the battle, per se, with healthcare directives.
So going off of that, Stephanie, do you want to tell us a little bit more about advanced directives from the healthcare perspective?
Sure. So what I really like about this relationship with Mary Ann is she kind of puts all of the meat and potatoes into the document, and then in our role in healthcare, and I'm primarily going to bring the hospital perspective because that's where I work, is when we really lean on those documents and activate them. And so if something were to happen to an individual, we hope that they've participated in this broader scheme of what we call advanced care planning. And filling out these documents, referred to, as Mary Ann said, an advance directive, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, patient advocate designation. It's part of that advanced care planning. I like to lean on what I refer to as the 3 Ds of advanced care planning, which is essentially determining who you trust most to speak for you if you are ever in a position where you can't speak for yourself, or you either, you've bumped your head or you're unconscious, whatever it may be. And then once you've determined who you trust most, you want to discuss what's important to you, what matters most to you, not only with that individual, but with your other loved ones and your doctors as well. So everybody has a good understanding of what matters to you. And then the documenting, who you trust most and what matters most to you, to kind of create that roadmap for us.
So that's a really good way and kind of a simple way to look at it. What do you want and who do you trust to do it for you? But can you clarify who does this document? Is it your doctor or your attorney?
Great question. So while your doctor plays a really good role in helping you understand your health situation and maybe even having some conversations about, gosh, what are some of the medical decisions I might need to make today, tomorrow, or a few years down the road. So they play a good role in it, but it really is up to you to put this information in writing. And what's great is we have estate planning attorneys like Mary Ann who play a really good role in helping you, number one, fill out the document correctly. And number two, making sure you have the correct document. So while your attorney and your doctors play a role in it, you are essentially the one that has to kind of take charge of that and getting it documented.
Mm-hmm. So then is there a specific document that people should use, and then where can they find it?
Great question. So there's a wide range of documents out there, and most major hospitals are required to have an advance directive. So you'll find, Munson has an advance directive. A lot of the other major hospitals in Michigan, and really most states, have an advance directive. Some of you might have also heard of the 5 wishes. That again is a type of advance directive. So there's a wide range of options people can choose from. Mary Ann, I'm sure, has her own document as well that she uses with her clients. And so you can do a simple Google search. And like I said, it can be a little overwhelming. That's why it's nice to have somebody that you can say, hey, walk me through this document, because it can be a little overwhelming if you just go to Google.
Sure. Mary Ann, anything that you want to add?
No, I am in complete agreement. It's to have one, I don't know how many of us have checked in early in the morning to a surgery center, right? And they're like, okay, did you bring your advanced healthcare directive with you or your healthcare power of attorney? If your answer is no, they're like, would you like to fill one out? Right? Because they really want to be able to know that they're talking to someone that you want them to be talking to. But more than that, more than those quick judgments, having the time to spend with your doctor, your healthcare provider, your attorney, to say, this is what I want. And you're thinking about, this is what I want in many situations. This is the person that I want, that I trust to speak for me. These are the decisions that I hope that person makes. And one of the things, and Stephanie and I know, are in complete agreement here about almost all of this, right, Stephanie? But here is, I've talked about estate planning as an act of love. This is truly the greatest act of love I can think of, because when your family is faced with a very difficult decisions, maybe you're at end of life, or maybe they need to move you to the next stage of care, knowing what you want is a tremendous release of burden for them. They know they're following your intentions and what you want. What you want may not be what they totally want, but it just helps them so much. I know, Stephanie, if you want to jump on there. Yeah.
Yeah, those are really great points, Mary Ann. And that is honestly a lot of what I witness in the hospital, because less than 30% of our patients have an advance directive. So that leaves a lot of patients without any kind of roadmap. And again, we hope that that individual is able to make their own decisions, but we just never know what's going to happen at any given time. And it could be something as minor as a medication reaction or urinary tract infection, all the way to something as significant as a car accident or a massive stroke. We just can't predict what's going to happen. And that's why Mary Ann and I are on the same page as far as everybody 18 and older really should have some kind of a plan. Just, who do you trust most? Specifically, one of the things that I see a lot in the hospital is, if a patient is so sick or something tragic has happened that they're unable to make their own decisions, sometimes there's a family member that comes in and says, I'm the DPOA. And then when we ask to read the document, we find that it's not the correct type of power of attorney. And so now we're in a position where it's too late. So again, I think a lot of people tend to believe I'm too young or I'm too healthy. I don't need to do this yet. This isn't for me. And those are the people where I would really say, you're the one who probably should be doing this because you're feeling well and you are able to really think through some of these concepts to be able to put them in writing. And the nice thing is you can change your mind at any time. You update your documents periodically. They're never, set in stone. But Mary Ann, maybe you can speak a little bit to these different types of powers of attorney, because it is so overwhelming.
It is confusing. It is overwhelming. And unfortunately, it feels like only a lawyer can separate it, and that is not how they should be written. But one is called the general durable power of attorney, and it is for your financial health, right? To handle your financials in the event that you're unable to. And sometimes what is confusing people is that it does have a little bit of healthcare language in it. So it may be the type of durable financial power of attorney that only springs into action if you are incapacitated or two doctors say you can't make those decisions. So I think that adds a little confusion. But then when you read the rest of the document, it's about selling or taking care of your property, your house, your bank accounts, your investments. And there's nothing in the document about making healthcare decisions. So that's what a general power of attorney is. It's a durable power of attorney. And it's confused with the healthcare. Too bad the names are so close. I try in my practice to call one something different, but it's all the same, right? The durable power of attorney for healthcare. Now, when you read that, it will talk about the kind of healthcare decisions that a person can make for you. Can they put you in advance into a nursing home? Are they able to make end of life decisions? And if they are, what would you like? What type of decision would you like to make? I know there's all types of ways to try to document your express and document your feelings about end of life. And no one really knows until they get there. But the best way is to prepare your family, let them know, look, I don't want to be on life support forever, but if the doctors think I can pull through and I'm improving, keep me there. I've seen powers of attorney that have time limitations on them, which I would never do, right? What happens if you say, I'll take a feeding tube for 15 days, and on day 14, you're looking great. 15 days, you're really looking better, but not ready to come off the tube. So there's just all kinds of decisions, and it's really one not to take lightly. I know many of us, and myself included, have been on the end of trying to make end of life decisions, and it's really hard. and it's really heavy. And it's made a bit easier if you know what your loved one wants.
Mhm. So, Stephanie, then what would happen if someone does become incapacitated and they don't have an AD?
So, and if they were to come into the hospital, so again, I'm going to kind of bring that hospital perspective. So let's say you're in a car accident and, EMS shows up, you're unresponsive. They're going to swoop you up and take you to the emergency department, right? Well, in the emergency department, we're going to do everything that we can. We default on saving you and providing you with all of that life-sustaining treatment. Where it gets tricky is, it depends on the circumstances of what's going on when you don't have an advance directive. Hopefully you've got a family member that kind of knows what your wishes are. But there are also times, and I'd say even in the worst case scenarios, it's those really difficult situations where it kind of becomes this battle between family members, where there's multiple family members who might not be in agreement with what they believe you would want in that particular situation. And like I said, we're always going to default on getting you better. But when we run into those situations of what does better look like for this individual, and are we in a position where this person would say, hey, this is a time when I would say I would rather be allowed to die than live in this particular type of situation. So it really does depend not only on the circumstances, but also the person, because we all have our own individual goals. We all have our own things that we find meaningful, which could very well be different for other people. And so just making sure that, when we look at these documents and there's just, a box checked or a little initial next to a statement, making sure that we have a good understanding of what they meant when they checked that box or kind of initialed that statement. And are we in a position where it would apply now? So it gets a little tough.
Yeah.
And I will add, in situations where, like I said, we have policies that allow a family member to speak on your behalf. But if there's multiple family members, that can get a little bit tricky. In situations where it's so hard for family members that they either, they become disengaged. Maybe they're not answering the phone anymore. They're just not able to make the decisions because it's too hard. We do sometimes have to go to the courts to get a guardianship appointed. And we always look at that as an absolute last resort. But we're finding that we need to do that more often than we'd like because there isn't any kind of advance directive or power of attorney. And Mary Ann, you mentioned guardianship earlier. Did you want to add a little bit about that?
I do, because I think it's really important for people to understand that in the healthcare setting, like at Munson, there are times when you are kind of at a standstill without having a decision maker, someone as a guardian, and that person that is at a standstill could be maybe making improvements. A guardianship is actually petitioning the probate court. And that's not something that you knock on the door, you give them a call and you say, hey, what do you think? And they give you an answer. You wait for a hearing. I think the last I heard it could be 12 weeks. I mean, it could be a very long time. I don't know if 12 weeks is, but it's a long time. But it's really the court defining and deciding what person in your life, or maybe not your life, maybe somebody, a third party, who can give personal decisions about you, about your health care. A medical examination by a physician is probably needed, and the court will appoint a guardian to make your personal decisions. That guardian will have the right over you, just like you do over your children, right? So they can make all these decisions for you, but it may not be the person you would have chosen. It may not be a person that you know. So that person that you don't know doesn't know your wishes or where to draw the line. And when it's not a person within your family or someone that knows you, your family can be cut out. I think there's just recently been legislation to inform a family. A judge has to inform a family why a family member wasn't chosen. But it can be a very difficult situation. And it's one that can be avoided by defining in advance using an advanced healthcare directive or a healthcare power of attorney, no matter where you have that drawn up. If you have it in your estate plan, that's great. But it is really a situation where I think is necessary to avoid, if you can.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, as you pointed out, most people can if they approach the issue early enough.
Definitely.
So to just kind of recap, because we've been talking about a lot of very important things. So you both recommend everyone 18 and older have an advance directive, and when someone doesn't have one, a court-appointed guardian may be needed. So let's say I was in a car accident and I'm unconscious, I'm taken to the hospital. Let's say I'm married. So if I was married, wouldn't my spouse automatically be the one to then make a decision for me?
Not in Michigan, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I'm sure Mary Ann can speak to this a little bit more too, but each state has its own laws around healthcare decision-making. And Michigan is one such state that doesn't have what some states refer to as a surrogate law or a next of kin law or a family consent law. Michigan has a patient advocate statute, which says you have to designate who you trust most, and it needs to be in writing. So even in situations, let's say if you did come to the hospital and you verbalized to us that you wanted your spouse, like I said, our policy would allow us to lean on that individual, but technically under the eyes of the law, he is not a legally authorized decision maker for you, whoever you verbalize. And Mary Ann, I think it'd be a good, if you have anything to add to that as well from the legal side.
I think that's one of the largest shockers to people, right? Or in the case of Maya, maybe if she were not married, maybe she would assume her mom and dad could help her.
Yeah.
And she would run into the same situation, right? She hasn't assigned them as a patient advocate. They haven't accepted in writing. And there's very specific rules around defining who your patient advocate could be. And I think you might have touched upon it. You need to have this document witnessed. You need to have it notarized. You need to sign it, right? And then the second step is the person that you've identified needs to sign and accept what it means to be your advocate. So unfortunately, or fortunately, but I think unfortunately, most people assume the person I love most, whether it be my boyfriend, my husband, or my parents, or my child, right? And that's just not the case.
Anything else that you want to add about that, Stephanie?
No, I think one of the things I'll add that Mary Ann mentioned when we talk about these documents and the specific things that Michigan law says they have to have in them in order for them to be legally valid, that is oftentimes an area that we find in the hospital that's done incorrectly, which means the document is invalid. And so while people have taken the time to fill out the document, if it's not filled out correctly, we have to just kind of treat it as if they don't have one, which again is another really good reason why, hiring an attorney to help you complete these documents will ensure that it's filled out correctly and that you're filling out the correct document as well. And then you kind of it should hopefully give you a little peace of mind, not only for yourself, so that, if you are getting scheduled for a surgery and somebody says, do you have an advance directive? And you can say, yes, I do. But more so just giving that gift to your loved ones that I love you and this is my gift to you. And it takes that burden off of them if they're ever in that position. We hope we never have to activate the document. So we hope you're always in a position to be able to make your own decisions. But as I said earlier, we just never know. And especially with the aging population, we're starting to see more and more of our elderly patients having some of these advanced chronic illnesses that leave them incapacitated. And so we would really want to encourage them to start this process much sooner than waiting until some crisis happens, because it might be too late.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you kind of mentioned that when you're writing this document, the what, if it's not required, I'm curious why you recommend it or have it as part of these documents.
Sure. So like I said earlier, Michigan has a patient advocate statute, which really just says, hey, we want to know who you trust most. But Mary Ann and I believe too, take it a step further to document the what. And the reason why that is because, advances in medical technology have come a long way. And for really, really good things have been able to happen. People are able to live longer than they've ever before. We've got ways in which we can treat illnesses that we had never before. And while those are really great things for most people, it's also created some of these challenging circumstances when people are being kept alive by these technologies, and we're not quite sure if they would want to be. I kind of always describe it as I've always had two types of patients that I've cared for. I either have the bucket of patients that say, I want to live as long as I can, no matter what, even if others believe that, they wouldn't want to live this way. And then I have another pocket of patients that I take care of who focus more on quality of life. So they really say, I want to live with the best quality of life, even if that means I might live a shorter life. And so if we don't know what bucket you fall into, the bucket you're going to fall into is you're going to get everything done. And we're going to do what we can to sustain your life. So if you're somebody who feels very strongly one way or the other, put that in writing. Because here's the other thing too, when you're in these situations in the hospital, it's very stressful for your family, and they might not be able to think about some of the things that you've said over the years or in the past. But if we can then print this document out and show it to them and go through it with them, then they feel like, oh, now I can remember because it's put in writing, it's written down. So again, it's a really great tool to help your loved ones in a really, really hard time.
Right. And this might be a little repetitive, but I think it's an important topic. So, as someone who leans on these documents during difficult medical situations in a hospital, Stephanie, what do you recommend people having in these documents that is the most helpful?
Yeah, like I said, when the big, I'm going to kind of flip it. So I'm going to say what don't put in your document.
Okay.
And Mary kind of touched on that earlier. Sometimes I'll read documents that'll say, I'll do CPR for 10 minutes. It doesn't work that way. Or like Mary Ann said, yes, I'd be willing to have a feeding tube for 10 days. Again, I really encourage people to describe a circumstance where you would say, if this were happening to me, then I would want X, Y, and Z, because there are situations that are short-term illnesses or long-term illnesses. And there are times when we don't really know, for example, a stroke, how well an individual is going to recover unless we give them that time. And so really kind of describing how recovering would look like for you, or what circumstances would you say, I would rather be allowed to die than to live in this situation. And those would be my recommendations to add, but certainly don't, try not to do that. Sometimes I'll also see, well, if I'm not going to have good quality of life, well, we don't know what that means.
Right.
Or I don't ever want to be in life support. And I kind of go, what do they define as life support? Because everything we do to you is a component of life saving.
Yeah.
So just try to narrow it down a little bit more.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more minutes left. Is there anything else, Stephanie or Mary Ann, that you want to mention about this topic?
I think it'd be great if you talked about your Let's Talk Turkey campaign, Stephanie.
Well, thanks, Mary Ann. So yes, one of the things that Munson does twice a year, we do two big campaigns for advanced care planning. One is this time of year, which we call Let's Talk Turkey, because families are going to be getting together for the holidays, and we really encourage people to talk about it. So if you go to our Munson Healthcare website under advanced care planning, you'll see workshops. They're free, they're virtual, they're about an hour and a half long, and I walk you through an advance directive. Page by page, we talk about, well, what is life-sustaining treatment and what is quality of life? And, when you say, just pull the plug, well, what if you're not plugged in? What does all of that mean? So we have those workshops that are scheduled. We encourage people to go to them. If you can't attend one, there's a recording that's on the website that people can watch. Really just start thinking about what matters most, thinking about who they would trust most to speak for them if something were to happen where they couldn't. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is don't put too much pressure on yourself to expect that you're going to get it done in one setting. it does take some reflection and some thought. And Mary Ann, maybe you can add to that since you're kind of on that end where you're helping people fill them out.
I agree. It does take some thought. And I also do workshops and over the entire estate planning, and then I touch upon the healthcare directives. And so there's a lot of resources out there that are like at no cost, right? So, but it is hard. So you need to talk. So I talk to people about who they trust most. And, a lot of times the question is, well, what if that person isn't available and I'm in this situation, right? So then I suggest that, who you trust, next as an important backup, because if there isn't someone, the hospital doesn't have a solution. And I am usually talking about those acute care issues as well. The long-term care is a little bit easier. People can think of that in a different way. They have different levels of trust in people, but it is a hard decision, just as, who's going to take care of me and who would I trust to make the decisions for me? And I find it that people sometimes feel like, who am I going to burden with that topic, right? Instead of, who do I trust most? Sometimes the person they trust most, they feel like, oh, but I wouldn't want that person to be burdened. And it's talking through that and encouraging the conversation at home. Talk to the person that you don't want to burden. They probably want to help you.
Yes.
Right.
And I would agree with that. And I've often encouraged people to say, just ask. And you might find they're actually, they feel honored
Right.
to be able to advocate for you in a time when you can't advocate for yourself. So I do see that a lot too, but so I'm glad you mentioned that, Mary Ann.
Really common.
Mm-hmm. Well, believe it or not, we are out of time tonight. This happens every time we get together. It goes by way too fast, but we talked about so much important information. So Mary Ann, thanks again for being here. And Stephanie, thank you so much for providing your perspective on all of this. We really appreciate it. And thank you folks at home for watching. And Mary Ann will be joining me again for our 4th segment in a couple of weeks.
In a couple of weeks. Yep. I think we're going to decide on because that would fall on Thanksgiving. I think we're going to decide if there's a different day, but yeah.
A different day that week. But again, thank you both so much for taking time to talk about this, and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
We will. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.